Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Rotary-Peace Corps Week webinar titled Successful Examples of Joint Rotary-Peace Corps Projects on September 21st, 2023. Please note that today's session will be recorded, and the recording will be publicly made available on our website in the upcoming days. My name is Chantel Dirksen. I'm one of the board members for Partnering for Peace, RPCV, and a Rotarian, and I will be your facilitator today. My colleague Molly O'Brien from NPCA will be helping with the technical aspects of the webinar. We're really grateful for her volunteering her time. And Steve Werner, past president of Partnering for Peace, who is also speaking today, will be helping to monitor the chat for any questions and comments you may have. So we really want to make this engaging and participatory, but please do so through the chat box so that we can keep tabs on the order and who the questions are applicable to. And finally, before we begin and hear from our speakers, we want to highlight that our next and final session of this week is going to be tomorrow, the 22nd of February at 2 p.m. Eastern or 11 a.m. Pacific time. And the session will focus on peace efforts related to peace building projects. It's very timely that this session will be tomorrow and that our topic today is going to be on projects as well, because today is also the UN's International Peace Day. It's September 21st. And what better way to celebrate International Peace Day than talking about ways that Rotarians and Return Peace Corps volunteers are using those connections to make tangible differences through projects on the ground. So with that, I would like to introduce our first speaker to you, Natasha Wanchek. And Natasha will be talking to us about her experience as an RPCV. Now, Natasha was an RPCV in Ukraine. And so I think this is going to be very interesting to hear from her about her experience. And for some reason, the bio that I had posted for her, I cannot find it at the moment, so I'm going to look for it for that. My apologies, but in the interest of time, Natasha, I'd like to turn it over to you. Please go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'll share my screen. 1 minute. How does this look?
Good.
Good. Okay, so my name is Natasha Wanchek. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Ukraine, Eastern Ukraine, from 1999 to 2001, which was a while ago. For my bio, I live in Brooklyn, and for my day job, I work for the Public Health Institute on USAID-funded global health projects. When I was in Peace Corps, I was in the Donetsk Oblast. This was at the end of training in Cherkasy. I was placed at a local NGO, environmental and cultural NGO, and this is a picture of one of their protest rallies for Earth Day. And I stayed in contact with a lot of the activists since then. What I'm going to talk about is the disaster response grant that we received for activists in an activist NGO from Bakhmut in November last year. Okay. 1 minute. There we go. So Bakhmut has been in the news a lot in the last year because it's near the front line. So I just wanted to show a few photos of what it looked like before when I was there and up until February 24th. So this is downtown in the park and a photo of the Day of the City, which was very festive. More recently, this is what's happening in Eastern Ukraine. The map shows above the big circle is Bakhmut, which is the town that I was in. It's so many news articles. These were from I think last October, November, when we were working on the DRG, very near the front line, and most of the activists had evacuated to Dnipro, which is about 4 hours to the west. And you can see, so Bakhmut was about 14 hours by train to Kyiv and about a 4-hour drive to Russia, the border. Since then, the map hasn't changed too much since then. Bakhmut is temporarily occupied, but the front line hasn't changed too much since then. The activists that I stay in contact with, there's a lot of overlap to this NGO that I've been supporting for the last year. And what they were doing, this is the activists who are now in Dnipro, is delivering humanitarian aid along the front line and to defenders. Um, and we did some fundraising early last spring and early last summer. And then I had run out of ideas. I saw what they were doing. It was amazing delivering supplies. And that's when the RPCV Alliance for Ukraine introduced me to Kim and Partnering for Peace last August. And that started us on this path of applying for a disaster response grant. And thank you again to Kim and Partnering for Peace for all of the support. So I had started raising funds already, and I got to know the NGO, and I trusted them, and we had built this relationship. And the RPCV Alliance introduced us, and Kim started explaining, and Partnering for Peace started explaining the process of how we could apply. And I had wanted to consolidate the steps to one slide, but I split it into two because the most of the work seemed to be finding a district, because in my understanding, each district can only support one open DRG at a time. So we started with the Metro New York City Rotary Club, and I gave a presentation last October. And with Partnering for Peace's help, we were exploring who had an open art DRG that might be interested in supporting humanitarian aid in Eastern Ukraine. So then I was introduced to the District Rotary Foundation Chair 7710, Marie Howard, and that got us going. They were interested and did not have an open DRG. So while that was happening, the NGO had to do their part. They introduced themselves to a local Rotary Club in Dnipro and invited the Rotarians to visit the humanitarian aid warehouse and started building that relationship, which was a requirement for the DRG. And they are still in contact, and that was, we'll talk about it later, but one of the advantages was the connection. So we had the district that was interested, and we submitted the proposal in November. And with the help of the Ukrainian American Coordinating Council, we transferred the funds because it's not easy to get funds into Ukraine now. And supplies were delivered in January, February, and then they worked to distribute the supplies where they were needed in the region. As part of the process, the Dnipro Rotary Club also went to review the purchases and to make sure everything was done correctly, which it was. And then in March, we submitted the report. So the time frame was really August, September to March when it closed. This just is an example. When I was talking with the NGO people about what do you need, they didn't even hesitate. They helped me put the full budget together. They had all the supplies that they knew that people along the front line who had an evacuated need and what defenders needed. And then I just grouped their budget into the DRG categories. So for hygiene, they needed flashlights and sleeping bags and gas burners, feminine hygiene products, so many things. For health, medicines, dressing material. And then they also purchased a lot of food, sugar, macaroni, canned meats, and we just broke it down by percentage. Most of it went to hygiene, followed by food, and then health. I wanted to say a couple things about the benefits of doing a DRG. This is a photo of the NGO director, Victor, with Andrei Adlantov, who's from the Dnipro Rotary Club. And when he and the Rotarians first went to meet the NGO people, he emailed us to give us his insight. And it was just a nice quote. He said they told us about their activities, and I was really impressed. The guys are real heroes. They've been delivering supplies to the most dangerous places in the country since 2014 because the conflict started in 2014. It was just the full-scale invasion in 2023. I think it's just great that you decided to help these guys. I'm sure they'll execute your help in the most efficient way. So having the local Rotary support and involvement was important both for the NGO to have the contact and the Rotarians there to be more involved. So the Rotarians weren't the ones going out to deliver the supplies, but they went to visit, then he went back to check the supplies, and then they've stayed in contact since. It was so exciting when we got the videos and photos when the humanitarian aid supplies were delivered to their warehouse. And we have videos of them unloading the truck and then the piles of boxes. So it was a little journey to get there and the funds and then waiting for the supplies to be delivered. But look at all the sleeping bags. It was great. So these are photos of the supplies that were delivered. Some of it, like in the truck, you can see they were just bringing things to the region, to the community centers, and delivering large amounts of supplies. But with this project, they also started a new initiative where they reached out to IDPs, internally displaced people, to ask what was needed, and then distributing some of the supplies across the country to people from the east who were displaced. And you can see sample packages of what was delivered, the food, the candles, things like that. And so that opened up a whole nother area or another avenue for them to reach people. And individuals could also go to the humanitarian aid warehouse and pick things up. It gave them more opportunity to support more people. This is the last slide. Something that I thought was great about this project was supporting people who were already active in a disaster situation with resources and connecting them with other local, I don't know if I should say activists for the Rotary members, but connecting them with other people who were concerned and wanted to be involved, and just making those connections and increasing the partnership. If you wanted to, so there's my contact information. I'm using my Ukrainian American Coordinating Council email. I'm volunteering for them now. And then if you wanted to know more about the NGO, they post a lot about their work on Facebook. And I could answer any questions. Most of what my experience was focused on DRGs and disaster situations. If it hadn't been a disaster situation, there would have been more conversation about what's needed and prioritizing. But because it was so clear that humanitarian aid was needed, we didn't have some of those conversations. It was more about among the known humanitarian aid needs, what are we prioritizing? And that wasn't that hard for them because they knew what the needs were because they were already doing it. And I could answer any questions. Thanks.
Natasha, this is Steve, and Kate had a question about, is it possible to know the NGO's name in Ukraine?
Yes, it's Bakhmut Ukrainian. And I'll share my screen one more time. You can, let's see if I'm sharing the right thing. So it's on Facebook, and then it's just /BAHMUTUKR. And they're interesting to follow. They're very active. They could have gone anywhere, but Dnipro's maybe a 4-hour drive from Bakhmut, and they went to the next biggest city where they could continue providing support in the region. The town has since been decimated, but they keep going. So it's nice to provide support when we can.
And Natasha, Kate has a follow-up question about what language you were communicating with everyone in.
So when I lived there, it was 20 years ago. So Peace Corps taught me Russian. Since then, the activists that I know there after 2014, they're native Russian speakers, but they all switched to Ukrainian after the conflict started. I don't know many people, even from the East, who still speak Russian. And they can speak Russian, but they all speak Ukrainian. So I started learning Ukrainian last year through the Ukrainian Institute, and trying to get the Russian out of my head and switching to Ukrainian just to be a more effective volunteer.
And Douglas Crockett asked what was the total value of the DRG?
$25,000,
Okay.
which I think is the max for DRGs. I think for me to apply with the NGO, that was the max.
And I don't mean to be a gatekeeper, everybody, but we thought that we could get more questions answered if we had them in the chat window. So please type your message, and if I don't state your question correctly, you can certainly follow up. But we'd like to give Natasha as many questions as possible.
And thank you, Steve and Natasha. What we can do is after all the panelists go through their presentations, we do have some questions for you to answer that might inspire those watching to ask some more questions as well. But thank you so much for your presentation, and thank you for introducing yourself at the beginning, because I just I couldn't find it at the moment. But you talked about being a volunteer back in the 90s, and so I think one of the things I'm going to ask you about once our presentations conclude is just the changes. I mean, there's the 30-year span. There's a lot of changes that have happened, not only, of course, the ongoing conflict, but just the way technology has probably helped improve this, make this project possible as well. But so thank you so much. With that, we'd like to pass it over to Steve, who is helping moderate, but he's also one of our speakers. Steve Werner, as I mentioned, is a past president of Partnering for Peace. He is also a very active Rotarian. And Steve's career has been in international development as a consultant, working with very large NGOs such as CARE, Habitat for Humanity, Water for People, and the International Society for the Prevention of Child Abuse and Neglect. He served as a Peace Corps volunteer in the 70s in Georgia, and then, or 70s in Korea, and then in Georgia as a Peace Corps response volunteer from 2016 to 2017. You've also been a board chair with the National Peace Corps Association, or NCPA, so a lot of valuable experience that you bring to the table to talk to us about today. So with this, Steve, I'd like to pass the floor to you to begin. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Chantel, and thanks, fellow panelists and everybody who's participating today. And I did want to also mention that we have a few of our board members who are in the audience, so to speak, and so hopefully they'll be able to share some of their perspective as well. I'm just going to share my screen for a minute. I'm not going to dwell on the slides. How do I get to the presentation mode, though? Molly or Chantel? So
yeah, if you want to press
you, go for it, Mom.
that slideshow at the top where it says slideshow, just go up just a little bit with your mouse.
Yeah, okay.
And then from the beginning all the way on the left there.
Okay. Okay, great, thanks. I am going to focus on some projects that were done in the water and sanitation hygiene field. We call
Steve,
it.
I'm so sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
It didn't go to the view. We're still seeing the back end of PowerPoint. Okay.
Let me see how from current slide, maybe. Let me try that. Does that work? Is that better?
No, can you try slideshow? If you hit from beginning slide, it might be that you have a double monitor and it's showing the other one.
Okay, I don't have double monitor. Let me
okay.
So set up slideshow, rehearse with coach, no custom slideshow.
Try hitting from beginning again.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay. There, that's the first one. So I am going to focus on a project or a couple of projects, but I did want to just start by reminding everybody that a Rotary has 7 areas of focus, and I actually didn't update the slide yet. the latest area focus is a focus on environment and.
Steve, I'm so sorry. Try pressing F5. We're still seeing the back end
Okay.
of PowerPoint.
Okay.
Thank you, May, for the suggestion.
Well, you know what? I don't mind if people peek ahead. So why
Okay.
don't we just do this in the
Sounds
interest of
good.
time? Okay. So anyway, Rotary has 7 areas of focus that correspond closely with Peace Corps' program priorities. And so the only thing is I didn't update the Rotary side of this slide. And so the latest area of focus that's been added is a focus on environment and climate adaptation. And so you can see, though, that there's a lot of synergy between Rotary and Peace Corps. And so my whole career has been focused on water, sanitation, and hygiene, which we use the acronym WASH. So water, W-A-S, sanitation, H, hygiene. But you can see that what Rotary focuses on is very closely aligned with what Peace Corps' program focuses. So many Peace Corps volunteers and Rotary projects are focused around WASH because when volunteers get to their communities or their schools or their health centers, they see that there's not a safe water supply or proper sanitation. And as a result, there's not always a lot of hygiene education. Of course, there's also many water-related issues that Peace Corps and Rotary focus on besides just safe drinking water, because water can be used for agricultural purposes, so which is an important issue for food security, and also a lot of diseases like malaria are spread through water and not in the improper way of having water gather at pumps, hand pumps. You know, if there's not like a proper ring around the hand pump, the water ends up in a muddy pool and then becomes a breeding ground for mosquitoes. I put this slide in here because WATSAN is another acronym we use, meaning water and sanitation, but actually we've updated that to be WASH instead of WATSAN. But we talk a lot about a 3-legged stool because, you know, there needs to be a focus on governance issues, business planning, and how the WASH system, whether it's a pump or a borehole of some sort or any other type of technology, and how is that going to be maintained if you're not collecting tariffs. In our country, of course, we pay a water bill, and the water that goes to a utility, and that money is then used for a lot of the infrastructure upkeep and maintenance that water utilities need in order to keep our water supply safe. But I wanted you to focus also on the joining arms of the stool, those red arms that connect the stool legs, because those all relate so closely to Peace Corps and the experience we get as returned Peace Corps volunteers to make sure that projects are successfully implemented, but also successfully sustained. So those are a lot of the things we've learned as Peace Corps volunteers, you know, how to work with the community, the importance of ongoing training, and how you communicate why these projects are successful, or important, and the other benefits of a WASH project, you know, which I'll talk about in a minute, gender issues, cultural relevance. So anyway, I just wanted this slide in here because it kind of demonstrates the benefit of a partnership between a Rotary Club and Peace Corps volunteers currently serving or RPCV groups that are addressing some of the same issues. So this picture is probably familiar to many of us that served in the Peace Corps, because these are also the kind of latrines we would use if we were out in a rural community. But the one thing here that kind of shows me that, and to be honest with you, I'm not positive this slide came from a Peace Corps Rotary project, but the fact that they are even doing anything to address hand washing is demonstrated by that cooler with the tap at the bottom. So, you know, Peace Corps volunteers, when they go to their sites, a lot of times focus on health education or hygiene education and teaching people the importance of washing hands after using latrine. Usually what we try to do is something more sturdy or better. But even a little bit of water with a little bit of soap is going to go a lot further to avoid disease prevention. So my point in this of showing this slide is how Peace Corps volunteers can even do something very simple in their communities to improve the health outcomes from the benefits of washing hands and after using latrines. So a lot of volunteers and Rotary clubs focus, well, volunteers work at health centers, and a lot of Rotary clubs are focusing their attention on improving health centers. But something as simple as teaching the staff the importance of keeping the health centers clean. So the Rotarians can provide maybe the supplies for the cleaning materials through a grant, but the volunteers are there all the time, and not all of us have a Rotary connection, so we love Rotary, but we know that Rotarians aren't in these communities every day, where volunteers, at least during their 2-year stint or the Peace Corps response time, are there, and they can make sure that cleaning was done properly. One of the things in development, and I don't mean to be preachy because many of you do development work, but a lot of times things are not sustainable because there's no follow-up training or monitoring and evaluation. So the point of this slide is that when Rotarians want to do something to improve conditions at a health center, working closely with a Peace Corps volunteer can be really helpful, because they can make sure that the cleaning is being done properly and being done regularly. So again, these are a lot of the community members that live near the health center who are coming in to help the health center stay clean by using disinfectant and soap to clean the floors and clean the walls and clean the beds and the other equipment that's needed in the health center. A lot of volunteers are doing their work in schools. So you might be going to a school somewhere to teach English, but then you get to the school and you see that they don't have safe drinking water or proper latrines. And one of the things that about the field that I'm in, which is the wash field, that's actually my day job, as I mentioned, is that there's many benefits besides just the public health benefit of having safe water to drink. When girls can have privacy for once they hit puberty, they stay in school longer, because when they don't have a good latrine or place to take care of their menstrual needs, they drop out of school. And of course, the longer girls stay in school and develop an education, which leads to a career, the better the community, better the family income, things like that. So a big focus of the WASH sector is on hygiene education for girls and improving the sanitation facilities. The other part of showing this slide is, first off, it says ladies and boys. So sometimes schools don't separate the girls from the boys, and then the boys being boys, unfortunately, sometimes we never grow up. But boys will try to, peek in at the girls and tease the girls, while they're dealing with their menstrual needs, which is a very big embarrassment. And that's why girls will drop out. So one thing about having a Peace Corps volunteer at the school is to ensure that the latrines are separated and that, the girls have privacy. Now, in this particular slide, there's no door, which would have been better, but it looks to me like at least the boys can't peek around the corner very easily to, embarrass the girls. Also, if you look at the slide, you see that the pits, which the waste goes into, this is a pit latrine type of sanitation system, it's ventilated. And it looks like there's screens at the top, so at least hopefully there's fewer flies and other insects getting in there that can then also help transmit disease as they, fly around the community and land on people's foods or cooking utensils. So it looks to me like this particular slide that volunteers being there at the school can help make sure that the system that might have been built by a Rotary Club is implemented properly and more sustainable because there's ongoing education. And then this is my last slide, and I want to just focus on another way that Peace Corps and Rotary have partnered. But this is from Guatemala, and actually, when I worked for Water for People, this was a project that we did where we not only improved the drinking water systems, but we built latrines that were properly built and maintained, and then we built hand washing stations. So for the kids, this was terrific. You know, they didn't really have running water to wash their hands. You can't see it, but there's soap there. And, you know, one of the other things about a hand washing station is you want to make sure that the soap doesn't disappear, because sometimes it'll get brought home by the kids to their families, which isn't a bad thing because then their families have soap, but then of course there's no soap at the school. But these children were taught by Peace Corps volunteer on the proper way to wash hands. You know, just like during COVID, we were reminded to, you know, wash our hands for at least 30 seconds, rubbing frequently, using a lot of soap. And those are the same techniques that the Peace Corps volunteers who work in the hygiene education field teach their students. But in this particular example, what was kind of neat was USAID in Guatemala gave small grants out to the Peace Corps volunteers that were in schools and wanted to improve their water and sanitation and hand washing facilities. The grants from AID were only $2,500 per volunteer, but then the volunteers were able to get water for people's help. So water for people, well, let me back up a step. The $2,500 that the volunteers had to go towards a wash system was matched by the local government and matched by the PTA. Now that in theory would be $2,500 from the USAID grant, $2,500 from the PTA, and $2,500 from the local government. So these systems cost anywhere between $10,000 and $12,000. That included drilling a borehole or building a gravity-fed system that brought water to the school, the pit latrines, excuse me, and the hand washing stations. So you know, about half to 2/3 of the money needed for these systems came from the volunteers. Also, I'm sorry, I should have mentioned the Peace Corps Partnership Program. So, but Water for People would put in the rest of the money. Now, I'm not trying to do a commercial for Water for People. The point I'm trying to raise is that the volunteers worked with a number of groups to help build these systems. Water for People, probably because I was a Rotarian, got a lot of that money for these systems from Rotary clubs. So the Rotary clubs felt really good. So without having to get a district grant or a Rotary Foundation grant, clubs could just contribute anywhere from 1/4 to 1/3 of the money needed for these systems. And they felt really good because there was leverage. Some of the money was coming from USAID, some was coming from the Peace Corps Partnership Program, some was coming from the government and the PTA. So it was a really good example of the value of the partnership because Rotarians helped to round out the money. In some cases, we had Rotarian engineers come down and help design systems. With some cases, we had volunteers come and help with the hygiene education or help the local folks with the construction, not by Rotarians digging ditches, but Rotarians, you know, kind of supervising, for lack of better terms, the local plumbers and all. And so it was just a really good partnership that showed how the volunteers identified the need and they reached out to Water for People. We had relationships with Rotary clubs and we were able to connect Rotary clubs to the volunteers. And it really was a good example, I think, of how Rotary can bring technical assistance and funding. Volunteers have the local community or school contacts, and they're there for at least 2 years, if not longer, and they can help to make sure that things are being done properly and maintained properly. So anyway, that's an example of how Rotary and Peace Corps volunteers can work closely around addressing the water sanitation needs in communities. So I'll just stop here. I could talk all day about this, but I'll be happy to try to take a few questions.
Thank you, Steve. We do have one question in the chat from Vladimir. And his question is, Steve, how much of an effort is placed on the training of Indigenous populations by the Peace Corps so that people can also become self-sufficient?
That's a really good question. And it varies, but generally volunteers are, through our training before we get to our sites and our Peace Corps stresses that we're not there to supplant the work of the local community. We're there to work with counterparts. And so I would say almost every volunteer's main focus is on training and motivation and guidance so that we're not doing the work that should be done locally or taking jobs away from local people. But because we develop relationships with our counterparts and with the local community, not immediately, you show up in a community, who's going to really say, oh, this person is somebody I can trust and I'm going to do whatever they tell us to do. But volunteers are taught how to develop relationships, and through those relationships, the community does value the expertise that a volunteer can bring, but the volunteer is really there, in my mind, more as a motivator. They might have great skills, but if they don't have the good people skills, the community won't listen to them. So Vladimir, sorry, it's a little tongue-tied right now. I think the Peace Corps emphasis on training and relationship building is key to why there's a lot of successful projects, and why volunteers bring those back to Rotary. And Rotary then knows that there's somebody in the community that knows what's going on, who work with, and how things get done. So it's really a great partnership because, again, Rotarians have technical assistance and access to funding, but volunteers have a local relationship. I hope that answers that question. Kate, you asked if the projects were initiated before a Peace Corps volunteer was there or because of Peace Corps volunteer. I'd say most of the WASH projects that I'm familiar with that have been successful between Rotary and Peace Corps volunteers or RPCVs is because the Peace Corps volunteers go and see a need. It's too bad sometimes that these needs weren't addressed before the volunteer got there, but at least once a volunteer lands in a community or is assigned to a school and they see a need, the volunteers know they can, because of Partnering for Peace, that they can reach out to Rotary clubs to get help with making sure that whatever the need is addressed. And I'm speaking about water and sanitation hygiene projects, but this is true in all the other areas of focus and program areas of Peace Corps as well. So it could be the same methodology is used for an ag project or a health project. So let's see, I think there was a follow-up question, but it's kind of, is there much of a Peace Corps presence in Haiti? Unfortunately, as far as I know, Dan Baker's on the call today, so he might know the latest, but my understanding is that because of the safety issues, Peace Corps is not in Haiti. And of course, there's tremendous needs there, but unfortunately, Peace Corps has to worry about the safety of the volunteers, so I don't think Peace Corps has a presence there. Dan, if you have more information than that, please feel free to add to that answer. Okay, or Molly, if you know, but I don't believe Peace Corps is in Haiti right now.
No, it looks like they ended the program in 2005. I'll throw a link in the chat for the Friends of Haiti group. It looks like there is an active group that you might be interested to check out as well.
Okay. Well, Chantel, I'll turn it back to you, and I guess if there's more questions, we can take them at the end.
Great. Thank you so much, Steve. With this, we're going to turn to our third speaker. Our third speaker is a stand-in today, so thank you so much for your support at the last minute. Her name is Ruta Casabianca. She is on our board. Ruta is the co-founder of Together for Real Changes, which serves people with disabilities in the mountainous regions of Georgia, where she served as a Peace Corps volunteer. But today she's going to be talking to us about a different project. And with that, Ruta, I'd like to turn it over to you to start us off. The floor is yours.
Okay, sounds good. So I had the privilege of writing an article about a gentleman, Bob Roberts, who signed up for the adventure of a lifetime in 1962 as one of the first Peace Corps volunteers to travel to the highlands of Peru to learn and advise potato farmers and help organize cooperatives. The first group included Betty, his wife, who became his wife, and Bob was introduced to the Rotary during his Peace Corps volunteer days. His quote is, "I was more or less the gringo in charge of dealing with the Spanish-speaking folks in Juarez, who controlled the region. The local Rotary Club made me an honorary member and was a strong supporter of our work. Upon retiring 9 years ago, he's joined the Mill Valley Club. The Rotary Foundation, U.S. and Peruvian Rotary clubs have supported the construction of over 145 greenhouses, helping over 800 individuals over the past 30 years, and they are continuing today. These greenhouses are located at 13,000 feet in the Andes of Peru, are changing the lives of Quechua-speaking farmers. Within a year, they moved from subsistence agriculture, a diet of mostly potatoes, to improve nutrition and sustainability in the market economy. The Peruvian host partner is the Los Alamos de Monterrico Rotary Club in Lima, which works closely with the local nonprofit Cusimayo, which means River of Happiness in Quechua. Cusimayo began working with the indigenous farmers in the Alto Pino de Puno over a decade ago. The founders began by listening to the mothers, a breakfast program for children and elders, followed by a unique home heating project that led to the greenhouse idea. Generational poverty and poor nutrition are deeply felt needs in the indigenous rural communities of Peru. Cusimayo worked with Instituto para una Altiva Agraria, which has developed a variety of technologies appropriate for the Andean farmers. Peer-to-peer training was the key to success. They assisted the farmers in the planning and layout of the greenhouses, including the development of water sources, selection of crops, agricultural techniques, training families how to cook and prepare foods they had never tasted before, and marketing of surpluses. Each year, most of the families construct the 65 by 16 feet adobe walls, plant and harvest their first crops. During the year, Cusimayo trains the families with basic accounting practices. Collectively, the farm families consume 60% of their harvest and market 40% in the local markets, truly a sustainable project. The Rotary Foundation Today, Bob emphasizes he has passed on the baton to the surrogate daughter, Jackie, who actually moved in with Bob and Betty when Jackie's father asked them to protect her from potential kidnappers. And to Rita Sedano Garcia, our club's international chair and the lead on current and recent global grants. As a Peruvian, and a professional banker currently working with Citibank. She is very involved and very good. And one of the important aspects to this whole project was the peer-to-peer situation there. So they were able to teach each other. It wasn't coming from an outside source. So I don't know if I can answer very many questions. Unfortunately, Bob was not able to come. And fortunately, I was able to interview him for this incredible work that they are continuing to do.
Thank you, Ruta. What we can do is if there are any questions for Bob in particular, we can please email them to us or post them in the chat, and we can respond accordingly following up after this webinar. But Ruta, thank you so much for giving us an overview of the greenhouse project in Peru.
Right. And one of the first projects for Peace Corps way back when.
That's pretty incredible.
I
what we're
agree.
going to do now, Ruta, and if you don't mind, we'll put you on as well. I don't know how much you'll be able to answer questions, but we'll put you in the spotlight as well. We're going to switch now to the Q&A portion of our panel, where we can ask questions of Steve and Natasha and learn more about the Peruvian project and greenhouses. I have a few questions that I'd like to kick us off with and then open it to the floor for anyone who might want to ask questions again of our speakers as well. So please go ahead and start utilizing the chat. And I have a few here that will hopefully kick us off. So for Steve, Natasha, and Ruta, I want to just step back for a moment and we look at these three projects and we see there's some similarities, even though they're very different. They're different parts regionally, geographically, and also just the different types of work, addressing direct humanitarian needs through infrastructure with wash and water sanitation, and also nutrition. But there are some parallels. I think these projects all show very good examples of the value add that Rotary and Peace Corps can bring when working together. They're collaborative, they're sustainable models of community development, which is something that as Peace Corps volunteers, that's always in the back of our minds. How do I make this project sustainable? How do I make sure that this grant money that I'm getting from either the government, maybe it's USAID, with one of the SPA grants that has a smaller amount, or Rotary, but how do we keep this conversation going so that once that money runs out, that we could look for another funding source, or maybe at that moment we can move to something self-sustainable, like Steve talked about with water projects. You need to collect some sort of dues to make sure that if the water motor doesn't work anymore, who's going to pay for the infrastructure? Who's going to pay to replace it? So I want to ask each of you if you can think about maybe in a few sentences or a paragraph, what do you think is very important for anyone in the audience who might be looking to start a project? Who should they go to first? Should it be a Rotary Club, a local nonprofit that they might have connected with as a Peace Corps volunteer? What are your thoughts?
Natasha, you want to go first?
I can jump in. I would say that the first would be to start a conversation with the local organization and the people that you have a connection with to see if they're interested, but also if they have a connection to a Rotary Club there, because that's a requirement. And yeah, to start with that and to see if they want to build that relationship and make those connections. And I'll also add the connections that I made in the last year. I found out about Partnering for Peace through the Peace Corps Alliance for Ukraine, and then Partnering for Peace helped me. I mean, there's a whole chain of communication and sharing information that as Peace Corps returning Peace Corps volunteers, we're used to it when we are in service, and then even now, more than any time in the last 20 years, I see that we can still do that. But yes, starting with the local organization and then making the connections here.
I think I'll talk a little bit about Georgia because that's where I served and ended up working for the next total of 9 years in Georgia and still continue. But so we started with the local organizations that were there and local embassies. That was our big thing. I got involved with the Rustavi Rotary in Georgia. And although it was a mixed help there, but through the Rustavi Rotary, I was able to connect with U.S. Rotaries from Seattle, Washington, to Denver, to Lincoln, Nebraska. And with all of that support, we were able to get several things that we could not have gotten locally for the Together for Real Changes to serve people with disabilities in the mountain areas of Georgia.
I guess what I would add from my experience, both through my work in the development sector and also as a Rotarian in RPCV, is that partnership to me is more than just working together to do something that's real and needed, but the value of a partnership to me is when there's added value. So for example, maybe using, some of these projects I talked about as WASH, a lot of Rotary clubs are keen on doing WASH projects because they understand that, it can really change a community and improve health, but improve education by keeping kids in schools. When there's excess water supply, then communities have water to irrigate their crops, things like that. But to be honest with you, just because, we might do a project in partnership with a Rotary Club in country doesn't necessarily mean that we're working with people who aren't trying to gain some particular benefit from the project. If a Rotary Club just goes in and on its own, we might partner with, say, a local government official or an NGO or community leader who is going to get something personal benefit from that. So a Peace Corps volunteer helps to identify who are good potential partners to work with. And I think Natasha spoke to that a little bit in her presentation. But the added value is that, okay, let's say we drilled a borehole or built a gravity-fed system, and now the community has water. But maybe because they've never had water before, the community doesn't understand the importance of washing hands and making sure that the water that's still collected at a tap is stored properly. So I've seen a lot of examples where a lot of investment went into improving the water system, and then people kept their water without a cover on it, and then the family dog would come and drink right from the water source, and then right behind them they would scoop out water to cook with or to drink. And so there's a lot of that. The added value again is that Rotarians might help to build the infrastructure, but the volunteers are there every day to reinforce behavior change. And that I have examples from other development issues as well, where this partnership's added values. And also, I'll just give very quickly a similar example that from a lot of the library projects that have been done, where Peace Corps volunteers reach out to Rotary clubs and ask them to help develop a library in their schools. Well, sometimes Rotary clubs just ship books, but we don't know if the books are appropriate for that age level or if they are in different languages. And so they end up looking good sitting on the shelf, but they're not used because they're not the appropriate books. But the volunteers can make sure by giving a list to the Rotary Club that these are the books we need, and then the Rotary clubs can get the books and help ship them. But in Costa Rica, there were Rotarians went down and delivered the books in person. They saved the shipping costs because they brought them on the plane with them. I mean, every Rotarian paid a little extra for the extra weight. But the Rotarians had experience. They were educators in this particular project, and they knew how to organize a library with a check-in, check-out system. But what was really cool was that the Rotarians, and talking with the Peace Corps volunteer, meeting with the Peace Corps staff, meeting with the local mayor and the local director of education in that community, found out that they didn't have any international baccalaureate program in the whole country of Costa Rica. Now, that's not that unusual for a country that's middle income or economically developing, that they don't have the money to create an IB program. But Rotarians who had worked in higher education or in school districts helped to create the first IB program in Costa Rica. So again, it could have been a successful project, or was a successful project because they helped create libraries and schools, but with Rotary's involvement, it took it to a whole new level. So I like projects like that and partnerships like that, the added value of working together creates something even bigger and better. I shouldn't say better, bigger.
Great. Well, thank you for those answers. I'm looking at the chat. We had 2 questions, and I'm just going to recap really quickly for those that are listening. And then I want to pass it over to Kim to actually respond to a question from Fred. So first we had a question from Ellen. Oh, and I also see one from Douglas Crockett. I'm so sorry, I missed that one. Are there current art PCVs in Peru that are still involved with Bob and Betty's 1962 project? Kim, if you are aware. Okay, and I see you nodding. So did you just want to go ahead and take that question and then answer Fred's question as well? And so in addition to the question is if there's still volunteers in Peru working on this project, Fred's question was, what obstacles are there to expanding the greenhouse project to cover an entire region or state? Is it feasible? Kim, over to you.
Yeah, I've spoken with Bob Roberts several times, and Ruta and I have both been delighted with his success through the Rotary Club. But right now there are 26 volunteers in Peru, and there's over 3,800 have served there since Bob was there with one of the first groups. Right now there are, to Fred's question, they have expanded this opportunity that they, again, Bob did the needs assessment. He knows the culture, he knows the people, he knows the highlands there. So after the first one, he continued to do this. And so far, for Fred's question about expansion, they've been in 27 separate projects in 27 communities, and over 140 families have taken advantage of this. And again, 60% went to feed themselves, and 40% went to have a cash crop and to be able to send their kids to school. And I was just in Peru, so I did talk to Bob at length, and there's like 1,500 types of potatoes in Peru, but you can't live it on that. So, and I also want to, if I may, I was just really honored to help Natasha and the Ukrainian project. Our whole theme for Partnering for Peace this week is celebrating our connections. And this was just such a perfect example of needs assessment that Natasha did. She knew the people, she knew the hospital was closing immediately and they needed food. The last grocery store had closed in the area. She knew the NGOs that you could protect, that you were safe and you could depend on. And I love that the Rotary Club in Dmitro said, oh, this is so great. We're going to be working with this NGO now from now on. So those lasting connections are what's so really important. And Steve does this every day. So thank you, Steve, for all your good work. And you've inspired all of us to keep going on more and more water.
Thank you. And thank you, Kim, for your answer. There's a lot of collaboration going on within each of these projects, and celebrating those connections and following the direction of our friends and colleagues that live in these communities that we're working with is very important. That they're driving a lot of this. They're telling us how we effective partners to them meet their goals, which I think is a really important component of what we can do as Return Peace Corps volunteers and Peace Corps volunteers, and also Rotarians. Ellen asked a question in the chat: how is Peace Corps interacting with Rotary International Service Chairs to identify and assess sustainability for future projects? And I just want to read out Carrie's response, because I think that's a very good question for any of us that are looking to maybe start within our clubs. Carrie replies, currently Rotary International presents Peace Corps to District International Service Chairs in multiple ways and times annually as a resource and prospective local collaborator and partner. The interaction varies on the initiative and interests of each DISC. That's District International Service Committee, I believe. Thank you for the nods. At this time, the partnership has no formal mechanism to report on the frequency or nature of interactions, but definitely if you're interested, talk to your international service chair and the committee. Each club has their own metrics that they're trying to meet, and having a couple, I think there's a couple of them that are specifically related to the International Service Committee. So there are opportunities. And thank you, Dan, for your comments as well. As speaking as a former Peace Corps program director, I'm not sure if you're still on. I know you had to drop. And I see, okay. So I think that's it for the chat. We have about 13 minutes left of this session. Are there any other questions from our audience?
Chantel, this isn't a question, but if you don't mind, I'd like to
Sure.
Recognize that Pat Merriweather Argis, who was speaking on Monday as Vice President of Rotary, has joined our session. So thank you, Pat, for coming back and joining this session. And she has a tremendous amount of WASH experience as well. So if there was anything you wanted to add about how Rotary and Peace Corps have worked on, can work on WASH projects together. So anyway, but I see that Valmir has his hand up.
Hi, Steve. Thanks so much, guys. This has been really motivating and inspirational. I'm Haitian. I was born in Haiti, and I was running a ministry, sort of trying to do some micro enterprise and micro business starting in Haiti, trying to realize that there's no middle class. So kind of looking at it from that angle of just helping some local folks that I knew in the town of Vigny to kind of get started with little businesses. So to go back to a point that Steve made earlier about sustaining the project once it gets going, after the DRG money is gone and so on. That's what I was looking to do without understanding this, the initial part. And so, for example, with $1,000, I helped 10 families each get a female goat, and had a male goat inseminate all 10. And they started a small business by having goat's milk and being able to have baby goats. And we got that going with just $1,000. $500, I was able to help a lady build a little shack and have locked doors and locked windows and shelves inside. And she was able to take her stuff that she was going down to the market and getting and selling to the locals. She was able to put it in a secured location instead of just out on a table outside of her door. And then, of course, when the weather was, bad, then she couldn't do anything. Now she has a secured facility, built of brick, with a tin roof and locks and everything. So it goes to show that in so many of these countries, third world nations like Haiti and some of these others, that a few American dollars can go a real long way to making a huge difference. And I know you guys already know that. So I was just wondering how the Peace Corps and Rotary was doing as far as, developing those kind of micro businesses to get the people to become entrepreneurs themselves and become self-sufficient that way, to keep whatever projects that were started, to keep them going. Because I can't wait to get back. I can't wait to get back to Haiti. It is really bad right now. I couldn't go back because of the gangs, but prayerfully, it'll be over at some point soon and we'll be able to get back. I didn't know if Peace Corps volunteers would think to come once it's safe to go back and that kind of thing. So anyway, just throwing that out there.
Yeah, there's a Haitian family in Pocatello, Idaho that is moved here. So in terms of getting started, not about Haiti, but because my experience is in the country of Georgia, I was actually assigned to regional television and a media center, worked on women's issues. But the director said to me from the first day that I was there, help us do something for people with disabilities. And that kind of stuck. And the key for me was finding the right Georgian woman who was a parent of a child with severe disabilities, a true go-getter. And she made the organization totally sustainable by working with the government. She figured out what their regulations were, what the vouchers were capable of doing. And so to build this, we now have 5 centers, and it was through my contacts initially with the International Women's Association, where we were able to get to the embassies, and that's where the main funding came from, and UNICEF, and now UNDP. But we have 5 major centers, but it's the municipalities who have now become very interested in this program. They also want to expand it to more elder care and home hospice and home health care in the mountain areas and in their regions. We found that we had to work with the municipalities and with the Ministry of Social Affairs and Health in order to make it sustainable. So we need extras, like nobody thinks about the transportation that's needed for these programs. So that's what big thing I've gotten from outside sources, including the Rotaries. And also, like right now, we need about $3,000 to have identify the children and people with disabilities that need physical therapy. And once we have that identification, then we will be able to get vouchers. So it's this kind of interplay, interrelationship that we need to build on. So that's what I've learned from being in Peace Corps, connecting the dots and working with the system, with the local regional system that is in place. And boy, did we need WASH in the villages when I first got there in 2010, 2011.
Natasha, Steve, did you have any comments that you'd like to make as follow-up? Just asking because I see your microphone's on mute, so I wanted to give you the chance to speak.
I don't have anything specific. I just wanted to express my gratitude for partnering for peace, because the DRG and Eastern Ukraine for humanitarian aid wouldn't have happened without partnering for peace's support and sort of sticking with me through this multi-month process of finding an open district. And I just really am appreciative. And thank you for including me here.
Well, thank you, Natasha, for coming and sharing your experience. I was very inspiring, and I'm sure there are others on the call that have been able to take away ideas on how they could maybe do something with their local groups.
You know, I'll just add one thing. I was just going to say, even if it's been years since people have been volunteers in certain countries, there's still this opportunity. I mean, if I did it 20 years later, just for people to keep that in mind.
Thank you. One thing oh yes, please go ahead, Steve.
I'm sorry, Chantal. I was just going to ask everyone's help who's on the call today. Ellen Young is one of the participants, and Alan are co-chairing what we call our outreach committee. And we would love for everybody here to contact their local Rotary leadership. We call them district governors. And Natasha's example of how she reached out to the New York Club, which is a very large and strong club. So you could also contact your local Rotary Club, but Rotary is such a big, diverse organization that not every Rotary Club knows about this partnership, and they would probably love to do something similar to what Natasha spoke to and Ruda spoke to and I spoke to. So, but just if you are willing, we can help you make those connections. Ellen and Alan could help you, and maybe they want to say something as well. But the way this partnership's going to grow is having everybody help to make these connections happen. So if you're willing to help, we certainly would love that.
Thank you. And I would like to ask Molly O'Brien to join us now and to give us a little bit of information on some of the affiliate groups that the National Peace Corps Association is working with, which I think might answer some of the questions in the chat as well about how to get started. Molly, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chantel. I threw a link in the chat. I can add it again. I can add some others, but I'm a board member here at Partnering for Peace, but I also work for the National Peace Corps Association as my day job. And one of the many things that we do at NPCA is support our affiliate groups, which are similar to the Rotary Action Groups. If you're part of Rotary, our affiliate groups range from country of service groups, geographic areas in the US, and cause-related groups. Partnering for Peace is one of those cause-related groups. But NPCA, we're always willing and very happy to make connections between these affiliate groups and anybody who's interested, because we think that's the best way to do great work. So if you're interested in learning more about affiliate groups, I did put the directory link in the chat. You can just search based on if you're looking for Friends of Kenya or looking for like Philadelphia Peace Corps volunteers, just type it in that directory and that'll help you. And I'll put Partnering for Peace, our email in the chat as well, if you're interested in reaching out for us for help. We do also have a lot of great resources on our website, which I put in the chat. So please check it out. There's a lot of great stuff. And I think the more people that join the network, the greater work that we can all do together. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Molly. And thank you to our panelists for joining. We have 2 minutes left, so we're going to go ahead and wrap up. I did see a question in the chat, May, about volunteering on a solar project for clean water with an orphanage in Kenya. If you could please send us your contact information, we'd be happy to follow up with you and answer your question directly. And also you could reach out to Molly because she's so graciously putting her email in the chat, which could be a resource as well. I want to thank everyone for joining. Please join our mailing list, subscribe if you're not already a member. You can stay up to date with all the great projects that Partnering for Peace is involved in through our members. We have one more session this week, as we mentioned, that will be happening tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific time, which will focus on peace efforts specifically and related peace building projects. So they've got a great lineup of speakers. It'll just be a powerhouse, just like today's session. So thank you everyone again for joining. And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Take care.